Actors who are secretly homeless. You won't believe number one. Some of the biggest names in Hollywood have faced something most people would never expect. We're talking about actors who earned millions, lived in mansions, and walked red carpets. But behind closed doors, everything fell apart. One of them slept in parking garages after making over $1 million a year. Another lived out of his car while fleeing across borders. And the actor at number one? He went from collecting castle to owing the IRS millions overnight. These aren't rumored. These are real stories of fame turning into something nobody saw coming. Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage has always been one of those faces you cannot forget. His performances carried a kind of wild spark that made people lean in. And for years, he moved from one hit to another, as if the whole industry were built around him. Leaving Las Vegas in 1995 pushed him into a new level of fame when he won the Academy Award for playing a broken man who had given up on life. From there, he slipped into roles that kept stretching him. Face Off in 1997, The Rock in 1996, National Treasure in 2004, Ghost Rider in 2007, and movies like Con Air and Gone in 60 Seconds made him one of Hollywood's highest-paid actors. Even in later years, he surprised everyone again with films like Mandy in 2018 and Pig in 2021. He was everywhere, and at his peak, he earned millions for each film. It felt like nothing could slow him down. Yet something strange was happening behind all that success. While he was collecting big paychecks, he was also collecting homes like someone collecting souvenirs. By the mid-2000s, he had gathered a fortune close to $150 million. It seemed endless, so he kept spending as if the money would never shrink. Between 2007 and 2009, he poured at least $30 million into real estate. He bought 15 homes, 2 private islands, and several castles. He had a mansion in Bel Air, a haunted place in New Orleans, and even a Bavarian castle. Many of these homes had odd additions, like private zoos, giant model train tracks, and rare artifacts he thought he needed. Then the real estate market collapsed in 2008. Everything he owned started losing value faster than he could react. Buyers disappeared, and the mortgage payments stayed the same. Property taxes stacked up. He tried selling, but nothing moved. By 2009, the IRS stepped in and placed a $6.2 million tax lien on him. Soon his total debt grew to around $13 million. His business manager, Samuel Levin, warned him again and again, but Cage admitted he ignored every sign and kept spending. Later, he blamed the manager and filed a lawsuit. But the case was dismissed in 2010. The damage was already done. His spending habits were almost unbelievable. He paid $300,000 for a T-Rex skull after outbidding Leonardo DiCaprio. He had a fleet of yachts worth $20 million, a private jet, and a Lamborghini collection. His homes were filled with strange and expensive objects like shrunken pygmy heads, meteorites, and rare comic books worth millions. At one point, he even bought a pet octopus for $150,000 because he believed it would help him with acting. His agent begged him to slow down and keep his spending under $30 million a year, but Cage didn't listen and kept buying more. When the pressure became too heavy, he began selling whatever he could. His rare comic book collection alone brought him $8 million. He sold homes, castles, cars, anything that could help him dig out of the hole. At the same time, he accepted almost every acting job he was offered, including small, straight-to-video movies, because he needed every dollar. Even with all of this chaos, he never filed for bankruptcy. He kept working until the debts were gone. By 2016, he had paid everything off. His story shows how fast everything can slip away when someone thinks the money will always refill itself. He went from a $150 million fortune to millions in debt. He stood close to losing everything, yet he refused to give up. His work brought him back and helped him rebuild his life. Today, he continues acting and has regained stability, but the journey he took remains one of Hollywood's most shocking financial falls, a reminder of how even the brightest careers can slide into darkness when no one is watching the number. Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes moved through Hollywood with a kind of force that made people stop and watch. At one point, he was one of the highest-paid action stars on the planet, and the world knew him for the way he carried himself on screen. His rise felt smooth at first. It started in the late 1980s and stretched through the 1990s as he stepped into films that kept getting bigger. New Jack City in 1991, White Men Can't Jump in 1992, Passenger 57 in the same year, and Demolition Man in 1993 all pushed him higher. Each success carried him into the next one. And then Blade arrived in 1998. That role changed everything. It turned him into a global name. The movie earned more than $131 million worldwide. Snipes earned around $7 million for the film and a piece of the profits. As the trilogy continued in 2002 and 2004, his fame spread even further. For a while, he stood among the top action stars in the world. Studios paid him $20 million for a single movie. His production company, Amen-Ra Films, helped him stay in control of the kind of work he wanted to do. His net worth crossed $40 million by the mid-2000s. He lived in large mansions, drove luxury cars, and moved through life like everything was set. But money that comes fast can slip away just as quickly. And little moments along the way hinted that things were already shaking beneath him. In 2002, his agency sued him over a $500,000 loan he had not paid back. It was a small public sign that his finances were not as steady as they looked. His lifestyle stayed expensive, even while his movies slowly shifted towards smaller roles and direct-to-video projects. He kept spending. The money kept shrinking. And then something far more dangerous entered the picture. Snipes listened to the wrong people at the worst time. He became involved with a tax attorney named Douglas Roseal and a financial advisor named Eddie Kahn. They told him about a fringe tax theory called the 861 argument. It claimed that money made inside the United States was not taxable. Snipes believed them. He filed returns in 1996 and 1997 asking for refunds of more than $11.3 million. The IRS saw the filings as fraudulent and began building a case. As they investigated, they found more. Between 1999 and 2004, Snipes earned more than $37 million but did not file any federal tax return. Each detail turned the situation into something heavier. In 2008, the case reached its breaking point. Snipes was convicted on 3 misdemeanor counts of failing to file tax returns. The felony charges tied to fraud and conspiracy did not stick, but the ruling was still severe. He was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and began serving time in 2010. He stayed there until 2013. The world he walked back into was nothing like the one he had left. The IRS continued to pursue him for back tax. Penalties and interest pushed his bill to about $23.5 million. His accounts were frozen. His credit rating dropped. Some of his money overseas became hard to reach. Each step forward felt heavier than the last. Willie Aames. Willie Aames grew up in front of the camera. People first saw him as a kid in shows like Gunsmoke, Adam 12, and The Courtship of Eddie's Father, and he moved from one set to another with the kind of ease only a child actor can have. Everything shifted in 1977 when he landed the role of Tommy Bradford on 8 is Enough. Suddenly, he wasn't just another kid actor. He became the boy millions watched every week. A few years later, he added Buddy Lembeck on Charles in Charge, and by then, everyone knew his name. At one point, he was earning more than $1 million a year, and Hollywood treated him like one of its brightest young stars. He went to premieres in limousine, lived in big homes, bought expensive cars, and threw parties that made him feel like he belonged to the world he saw on magazine covers. It all looked steady on the outside, and he kept climbing. As the roles piled up, his confidence did too. He appeared in more than 100 episodes of 8 is Enough, and fans treated him like a teen idol. Producers trusted him enough to let him write, direct, and work behind the scenes. For a while, everything he touched kept his lifestyle going. But success can hide cracks that slowly spread, and the cracks in Willie's life grew quietly while he kept smiling for cameras. By the 1990s, those cracks opened wide. He put money into a coal mine that ended up breaking him instead of making him richer. The IRS came after him for $400,000. Then his divorce in the early 2000s hit him with a $9 million loss. On top of that, he filed for bankruptcy in 2003 with more than $27 million in debt. His houses, his cars, even the exotic pets like Siberian tigers he once bragged about, all became reminders of how fast everything was slipping away. By 2009, He was selling his belongings in a garage sale in Olathe, Kansas, watching strangers walk away with pieces of a life that no longer existed. When the house finally went to foreclosure, there was nothing left to shield him. He fell harder than he ever thought he could. He slept in parking garages, under bush, and behind dumpsters. He told Entertainment Tonight that he had gone from eating at the White House to lying in the bushes at the Hollywood Bowl, trying to stay warm. In quiet moments, he would stare at the ground and wonder how a man who once made more than $1 million a year was now hiding behind trash bins just to get a little rest. The shame stayed heavy on him, and he admitted that he carried it like a weight he didn't know how to drop. Later, when he looked back, he didn't hide from the reason. He talked about a lifestyle that spun out of control, about parties that blurred into each other, about drug addiction that drained more than money, and about investments that looked good on paper but sank in real life. He blamed himself for ignoring warning, for trusting the wrong people, and for making choices he knew were reckless. Fame had pushed him forward fast, and he never learned how to slow down. Still, something in him refused to stay there. When everything was gone, he started again. He became a satellite installer and learned how to work with his hands. He took jobs where nobody knew him. He even worked on a cruise ship and began building a new life at 47. Slowly, he created a rhythm that wasn't tied to fame. Later, he became a financial advisor because he wanted to help others avoid the traps he had fallen into. By 2022, he had remarried and launched his own production company, standing in a place he once thought he would never reach again. Randy Quaid. Randy Quaid had built a career most actors only dream about. People knew him as Cousin Eddie from the National Lampoon's Vacation films, a character so funny and so human that audiences kept asking for him again, and he returned again and again, from the first Vacation in 1983 to Christmas Vacation in 1989 to Vegas Vacation in 1997. Along the way, he kept proving he was more than a comedy sidekick. He delivered a heartfelt performance as Russell Cass in Independence Day in 1996, a film that pulled in more than $817 million around the world. He showed a deeper, quieter power in The Last Detail back in 1973 and earned an Oscar nomination for it. Years later, he appeared in Brokeback Mountain in 2005, which won Best Picture. By the time everything began to fall apart, he had appeared in nearly 100 films and built a reputation as a reliable and versatile actor who could slip into any role. For a long time, things looked steady. Then the ground started shifting beneath him. It began in 2006, when he sued the producers of Brokeback Mountain. He said he was paid nothing meaningful for his role as Joe Aguirre, while the film earned more than $178 million global. That lawsuit opened a door to a long line of problems that kept draining him. In 2008, the Actors Equity Association fined him $81,572 after accusing him of verbally and physically abusing castmates during a stage production, and they banned him for life. It was a painful blow because it cut him off from work he depended on. As the years moved forward, the pressure grew. In 2009, Randy and his wife Evie were accused of walking out on a hotel bill at the San Isidro Ranch, supposedly owing more than $73,000. They said the charges were fake. They said something bigger was happening. By 2010, the situation turned even stranger. Both of them were arrested after fleeing to Canada, seeking asylum. They claimed a Hollywood group they called the Star Whackers was after them. The Canadian authorities set their bail at $500,000 each. When they failed to appear in court, they lost the bail and sank even deeper into trouble. Money was slipping through their fingers long before all this. Back in 2000, Randy and Evie had filed for bankruptcy with more than $3.5 million in debts and only $3.4 million in assets. As time passed, the numbers grew worse. Celebrity net worth listed him at negative $1 million. A man who had once stood on giant film sets, worked beside top directors, and earned awards now found himself sinking into debts he could no longer control. Alongside the financial collapse came something else. Randy started speaking about conspiracies he believed were behind everything. He said Hollywood lawyers, estate planners, and accountants had stolen from him and sabotaged his career. He said this monstrous ring had killed stars like Heath Ledger and David Carradine in order to seize their assets. He believed he was next. He believed his career had been destroyed on purpose. Every lawsuit, every fine, Every accusation felt connected to him, and as he tried to explain his fears, people around him dismissed his claims as wild or delusional. The more he spoke, the more the industry pulled away. With doors closing everywhere, he and Evie drifted deeper into the margins. They spent time living out of their car. They crossed borders trying to escape what they believed was a threat. They showed up in public wearing pink handcuffs or with credit cards taped to their foreheads as a way to call out the system they believed had betrayed them. And through it all, the distance between the man who once stood under Hollywood lights and the man wandering from place to place kept widening. Randy Quaid's story carries a quiet warning. Fame can lift someone up fast, but it can fade even faster. He went from box office success to homelessness, from awards and applause to fear and conspiracy. And every step of that journey is filled with dates and numbers that show how quickly a life can shift. It is a tragic and startling path that reminds people how thin the line can be between the spotlight and the shadows. Danny Bonaduce. Danny Bonaduce grew up in front of millions. People watched him every week in the early 1970s as Danny Partridge on The Partridge Family, a show that ran for 96 episodes and turned him into a teen idol before he even understood what fame really meant. When the bright lights faded in 1974, the world moved on, but he didn't know how to follow it. Work slowed down, offers faded, and the silence that followed felt heavier than anything he had faced as a kid. He tried to hold on to the life he once had, but slowly, everything around him began slipping away, starting with his money and then his stability. As he drifted through the late 1980s and into the early 1990s, trouble kept finding him, or maybe he kept stepping toward it because he didn't know any other way. By 1990, he was in Florida to host a children's anti-drug event, yet that same trip ended with him being arrested for trying to buy cocaine. The shame from that moment hit him hard, but the fall didn't stop there. Just over a year later, in 1991, he was arrested in Phoenix after beating and robbing Darius Barney, a trans prostitute. Barney was left with a broken nose and painful facial injury. Danny pleaded guilty to reduced charges and agreed to pay the medical bill. Each headline pushed him lower, and each stumble took more out of him than the one before. All the legal trouble mixed with substance abuse, poor choices, and business failures began eating through whatever he had left from his Partridge Family days. Money that once felt steady began to vanish until he had nothing to cushion the fall. At one point, he had no home at all and started living in his car on the streets of Los Angeles. Nights were long, sleep never felt safe, and meals depended on which friend felt sorry enough to hand him something that day. He later admitted that he was homeless, addicted, and hanging on by threads that felt too thin to last. Yet somewhere in that chaos, he kept trying to climb back. The 2000s brought him a new direction. Through radio and reality television, his voice on air slowly gave him a place again, even as the past kept tugging at him. In 2022, he stepped away from his radio show because of health problems that felt like stroke symptoms, another hit that slowed him down and reminded him how fragile everything was. Still, he found steadiness where he could. He married Amy Railsback in 2010, a person who helped organize his life and career, and he settled into work on Seattle radio. It wasn't perfect, but it was solid, and after years of chaos, solid mattered. Toni Braxton had a very different ride, but the drop that came later carried the same sting. Her voice filled the 1990s with songs that reached across the world. Her first album sold over 10 million copies. Her second, Secrets in 1996, went 8 times platinum in the United States and crossed 15 million sales globally. One Break My Heart became the song people couldn't forget, holding the top of charts and echoing through every corner of her fame. On stage, she looked unstoppable, but behind the scenes, her finances were cracking long before the world knew. By the early 2000s, trouble had grown so much that in 2008, she filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The numbers looked unreal. She listed $1.6 million in assets and $18.3 million in debt. $14 million of that was owed to Arista, and $2 million more went to Atlantic for unpaid royalties. Credit card companies, banks, and luxury stores like Tiffany & Co. and Neiman Marcus all waited for money she didn't have. Her Nevada home, worth $2.6 million, slipped into foreclosure. What looked like success from the outside was falling apart piece by piece. Bad contract, overspending, and a lack of guidance mixed together until everything collapsed. In 2010, she filed for bankruptcy again. Court documents revealed that she had transferred over $53,000 to her estranged husband in an attempt to keep that money out of creditors' hands, which brought accusation fraud. The fall felt endless, and each new detail made it harder to see where she could go next. Yet slowly, she found her way back. She returned to touring. She joined reality television. She released new music. And in 2018, her album Sex and Cigarettes showed the world that she wasn't done. She had taken the hit and still stood up. Both Bonaduce, Toni Braxton, reached moments where money didn't just disappear, but sank them into places that felt impossible to climb out of. They faced public humiliation, private pain, and long stretches where nothing seemed to move in their favor. But time kept giving them small chances, and they kept taking them, holding on until the path in front of them began to rise again. Their stories prove that even when everything collapses, there are ways to rebuild if someone is willing to keep trying when it feels like the world has already stopped watching.